relations between the traditional financial sector and the financial sector that is being developed today in DLT technology that has some different features that could be very good, but doesn't need to be. Then the designing part of this problem is quite important. So all of this discussion is being conducted in international bodies and in other central banks. I would like to thank you all, to thank the components of the table, and I want to give the floor to Emmanuel.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. So, bom dia para todo mundo. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would take a chance to express my gratitude for being here, for the organization, for allowing us to discuss our papers. It's an honor to be here. Today, I will be discussing about disruptive technology in wholesale payment systems. So the focus will be on the recent exploratory work that has been set up by the Eurosystem. Here, a quick look through the agenda. Very briefly, I will try to make you a little bit of an introduction. Then I will move to an overview on payment systems and their role in modern economies, followed by a quick history of the so-called target services, then explore the role of central bank money and distributed ledger technology. Finally, the main part will be on the Eurosystem exploratory work. I'll try to show you the solution that has been put under the scope of the exploratory work and the main findings and comparisons between the solutions. So let's start. First of all, which are the goals of this paper? Well, first of all, I would try to enrich a little bit the literature on the topic, because a lot of attention has been put on the retail side of central bank digital currency in different jurisdictions, but far less attention has been given to the wholesale dimension of this aspect. And the second goal of the paper, which is the goal, my goal for today, is analyze the solutions that has been provided and try to address some points about this solution. So let me be a little bit academic here. The research questions are: why is it so important that the Eurosystem explores new technologies for wholesale central bank money settlement? And what are the solutions included in the scope, and how do they propose to face the challenge? Just as usual, a little bit of literature review if someone is interested on the topic. Once again, is more on the payment system side and on the role of central bank money. The literature on the technical aspects that I will be tackling here today is far more technical and still less developed. So the paper also tries to provide an overview, a general framework of what's going on. So let's start. Let's dive in. What are payment systems and what are they useful for? So payment system can be defined as a set of entities, procedures, and infrastructures allowing the safe, quick, and efficient transfer of the means of payment. It's arguably the most important payment infrastructure. It's the most important financial market infrastructure. It's, say, just to use an image, it's like the bottom of the iceberg where all the rest of the financial system stands above. The main goals are ensuring certainty of the transactions, so meaning that irrevocable transfer of funds, preserving financial stability, and allowing the monetary policy impulses to be transmitted to the real economy. There are a lot of types of payment systems. The most common distinction is between wholesale and retail, and also between gross settlement and net settlement. Also, a very important difference is the moment of the settlement. So, for example, we have real-time settlement and designated time settlement, so not in real time. For wholesale payment systems, the most common, the most predominant form is the so-called RTGS, so real-time gross settlement. And this brings us to a little bit more closer to the main topic. As I said, the focus here is on the work that has been conducted by the Eurosystem. The Eurosystem has been providing payment systems for more than 2 decades now, from Target 1, Target 2, T2S, which is the pan-European platform for settling securities, then TIPS for instant payments, a hot topic, followed by T2, which is the current RTGS system in Europe, and in June, hopefully it's foreseen to be ECMS, the European Collateral Management System. I am spending a few words here because all the exploratory work from the Eurosystem is based on adapting these existing infrastructures to work and to have interoperability links with market DLT platforms. So that's why here you can find a little bit of this recap. And a very important concept here is the role of central bank money. What is central bank money settlement? So first of all, a little bit of maybe a juridical basis. What's settlement? Settlement is the final part of any transaction, meaning that the transfer of funds is irrevocable and that the payer can see his obligation discharged towards the payee. So it's very important from a technical and legal point of view. And 2 concepts should be explored here. The concept of settlement asset and settlement institution. The settlement asset is the asset or the claim of an asset that is used for discharging the obligation, so that is used for the settlement to happen. And the settlement institution is the entity whose liabilities are used as a settlement asset. Now, the principle for financial market infrastructures, and here I'm referring to the Bank of International Settlement, of course, clearly states in Principle 9 that financial market infrastructure should conduct their settlement in central bank money, meaning that central bank should be the settlement asset where practical and available. So this already partially answers the first question. Why is the Eurosystem so focused on exploring new technologies for wholesale payment system in central bank money? It's because the Eurosystem should be at the forefront of technology, preserving and ensuring the role of central bank. Because otherwise, for example, of course I'm a central banker, so quite concerned with policy-related issues. Private solutions could emerge, and therefore putting the role of central bank money in a secondary place and maybe give too much focus on commercial bank money, which is a less safer asset. So this is why all the focuses are going there. And the next slide here is focused on distributed ledger technology, because the point is, and this allow me to say that has been made pretty clear by Banca d'Italia's governor, Fabio Panetta, in more than one speech, the point is not whether the Eurosystem or the ECB will issue a wholesale CBDC or wholesale central bank money. The discussion is on how to adapt the current infrastructures to have interoperability with market DLT platforms. So it's not whether new issuance will be done or not. the target services has been provided wholesale central bank digital currency for decades now, because for banks, they settle wholesale payments in a digital way with central bank money already. The question, how to make sure that this solution remains innovative and efficient, so to preserve the role of the central bank money. Here, very quickly, a couple points on smart contracts, which a lot of you might be quite familiar with, and specifically also on the DLT pilot regime. It is a regulatory framework issued in March 2023, and it allows operators of market DLT infrastructures, granting them some exemptions from the framework. So they have some exemptions from the CSD regulation, from the EMIR regulation, from the MiFID and MiFIR regulation, and also related to the principle for financial market infrastructure. So it's like a regulatory sandbox that allowed the project to take place. So let's get into the real focus on the paper, the Eurosystem exploratory work. So what happened is the Eurosystem launched the so-called exploratory work, including 3 main solutions in the scope. In this context, the central banks providing their solution are called solution provider central banks. And 3 central banks emerged as solution providers. The Central Bank of Italy, where its solution called TIPS #link, which is based on TIPS, the infrastructure for instant payments that I was mentioning before. The German Central Bank with so-called trigger solution, and the Central Bank of France with a solution called full DLT interoperability. What has been done here? The first wave of market participants, so from the financial sector, started in May 2024, so-called the first wave. The second one started in July 2024, both ending the exploratory work in November 2024. The exploratory work consisted in both trials and experiments, meaning that experiments were conducted with mock settlement assets, so with fake settlement assets. Trials were conducted in real central bank money, so this is already happening. It happened already in production grade with real money. The test has been performed, and the Eurosystem will, in due time, release all of the findings. The crucial point here is that a so-called new technologies for wholesale settlement CG contact group was established for acting as a steering group between the Eurosystem and the market participant, to meet market participants, because the goals of the Eurosystem exploratory work are mainly 2. The first one is meeting the market demand for central bank money settlement available in DLT platforms. And the second goal is enriching the knowledge of the Eurosystem itself on this topic, analyzing and comparing the 3 solutions that have been provided. So here the paper is aiming at explaining how the solutions work, because they are very technical and still let's say a few studies have been done on that, and also to compare, to try to assess a little bit some findings, some preliminary findings on the solution themselves. So moving to the first solution, so-called TIPS #link by Banca d'Italia, is an interoperability model between market DLT platforms and the target services. Specifically here, the target service that has been chosen is TIPS, so Target Instant Payment Service. And it's based on a so-called API gateway approach, when there's an interface, an API, that is DLT agnostic, meaning that the market can use whatever DLT they want, so it's very versatile, I would say. The Eurosystem will act as a trusted third party, and most importantly, this solution would allow atomic execution to take place. What's atomic execution of cash and asset? The main use case, the main business case that has been explored is the so-called delivery versus payment. That's called DVP, where one part sells or buys an asset, and the other part will, of course, provide cash for buying it, for example. So we have a security leg of the transaction and a cash leg of the transaction. So it's a two-leg transaction. And in this context, DLT is particularly suitable because it allows atomic execution, meaning that both legs are executed as close to simultaneously as possible, and also they only settle if the other leg settles, meaning that there's no counterparty risk, or better, it's very reduced. So the systemic risk, the counterparty risk is quite reduced, and this is important also from a financial stability point of view in financial markets. So this is the most important feature, I would say, of this solution. I will not enter into all the technical details, but what happens is that the seller and the buyer, they issue a so-called pre-image that can be used to unlock their smart contract on the DLT, and the DVP, the delivery versus payment, is written on this smart contract. So if the payment goes well, TIPS, so the target infrastructure where the payment happens, will inform the APA gateway that will either release the contract if everything goes well, or block it if, for example, the payment doesn't happen in a defined time zone, for example. Moving on to the second solution is the trigger solution by Deutsche Bundesbank. It's quite similar in the sense that there is a technical bridge, a trigger chain, operating between the market DLT platforms and the target services. The main difference here is that the settlement of central bank money doesn't take place on TIPS, rather than it happens in the RTGS DCA, meaning the dedicated cash accounts that financial institution held at the target services. So it happens on the RTGS component, not on the instant payments service. But from a technical point of view, they are quite similar. So I would quickly go to the French solution, which is the most different one from a conceptual point of view. What happens here is so-called full DLT because its hypothesis is that there would be an additional target service, so a real new target service offered by the Eurosystem, which would be a new platform, a DLT platform, meaning that the market DLT platforms that offer, of course, a high level of programmability, for example, can have an interoperability link with the Eurosystem DLT platform. That's why it is called, for example, full DLT interoperability. And let's say the main feature here is that in the other solutions, this would not happen in the French and in the German one. In the French solution, we would have both cash and securities in a tokenized form. So this is the most relevant difference, I would say, for the moment. Just for clarity's sake, actually, Banque de France provided three solutions. One is called full DLT interoperability that has been included in their Eurosystem exploratory work, but they also, let's say, studied a full DLT integration and distribution model that were not included in the scope of the exploratory work because the interoperability solution was deemed to be the one with the best time to market and less policy-related issue. So this is just for being actually clear on this topic. Here, in my paper, I try to address some of the main differences between the model, some advantages and disadvantages between one and the other. For example, the German and the French solution, they use a so-called hash time lock contract. It's a protocol, it's an IT protocol working on DLTs that has a lock contract, meaning that the contract is locked, for example, in a smart contract, but it also has a time lock, meaning that after a certain time, there would be an expiration in the contract. This is not true for TIPS/Link because it uses an HCL protocol, meaning that there's no time lock. And what's the effect, the impact here from a business point of view? That which an hash time lock contract, a DVP failure could happen if the time lock expires. On TIPS/Link, there would be no contemplation for a DVP failure. This is the first big difference. The second difference is on the level, on the degree of programmability. And here I compared mainly the trigger solution, so the German one and the Italian one, because the trigger solution could in some ways be more versatile in the sense that it would allow market participants to connect with their own DLT nodes on the trigger chain, on the technical bridge. Whereas in TIPS, this would not be possible. So the German solution clearly would offer a higher degree of programmability, but on programmability we will have Xavier addressing his paper on this specific topic. Let me conclude, move towards the conclusions because we're almost running out of time. Just some food for thought and some possible research avenues for practitioners, researchers, technical experts, for example, central banks, but also multilateral institutions. First of all, very, very important. These are the solutions included in the scope of the Eurosystem, but there are also many, many private solutions coming from SWIFT, from CCROS, or from also the Bank of International Settlement that are being investigated. The main point is that the three solutions, and in general, making target services work with DLT platforms would allow to move towards a T+0 settlement cycle, meaning that nowadays it's T+2 in Europe, for example. So there's the trade, and 2 days after we have the settlement. With T+0, the settlement would be on the same day of the trade, and this would clearly increase the competitiveness of European market. And this would be extremely beneficial for the capital markets union purpose that is being it's a hot topic in the European Union right now. Also, before I conclude, just some points. European ledger, European unified ledger, what it is. These solutions are being the base for further studies on a European unified ledger, meaning it would be an holistic environment in which central bank money is present, commercial bank money is present, and all the actors from the market are together. This is something that will be surely explored. Last but not least, and here I am really concluding, in February 2025, the Eurosystem confirmed his willingness to expand the initiatives for settling in central bank money with DLT. A two-step approach has been chosen, meaning that in the short term, namely as soon as possible, is mentioned in the press release, one solution will be put in place based on the three interoperability solution that we saw, and in the longer term, a more integrated solution will be investigated. That was everything from my side. Thank you very much for the attention, and I leave the floor to the other colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I would like to invite Daniel Steinberg, da Universidade Mackenzie, to debate the work. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you for the opportunity of reading your amazing paper. It's been a pleasure. I learned a lot. A big disclaimer, I'm a lawyer speaking among economists. I think this is important. So this is important because the angle of my comments will change a bit, and I hope it's helpful for you. In a nutshell, I think your article, which is very good, has the objective to discuss the benefits of the DLT technology in wholesale payments, and you make sure that everyone understands that it is a wholesale payment that you are talking about, because indeed there were many papers and many discussions already on retail, and also the importance of central bank money settlements. You also highlight the importance of public money, hard money, in the use of real-time gross settlement platforms. And in my perspective, you have two main messages. The first one is, you don't say that, but is what, at least my reading of your paper says, payment systems are not neutral. They're fundamental for a thriving modern economy, and they should be enhanced. However, they require certain foundations. They require a legal framework. You specify the importance of the T+0, which means the settlement and the discharge of the payer. So it is indeed one message that you give, that payment systems are not neutral. They require a robust legal framework to support the operation. And you also say that wholesale CBDC, or you don't mention CBDC, but the wholesale central bank money can generate more efficient, especially with atomic settlements. I have 4 comments and hope it helps to enhance the arguments of your article. The first comment is related to the statement that you give, that payment systems play a crucial role in the implementation of the monetary policy, and it's also function as an efficient way of circulation of money. So it is an important feature for the modern economy. You also mentioned the importance of target systems in real-time gross settlement. You mentioned that this is indeed important, which use central bank money, public money. And then there is the emphasis on DOT, on how DOT could enhance all that. I think you would benefit in the article, you mentioned here, but in the article you would benefit in actually answer if real-time gross settlement and DOT platform should coexist. It could be obvious for us that it should coexist, but how? No? And actually, you give some answers. For instance, the trigger solution, which is there already. So my comment here is perhaps to expand a little bit your findings on that question. Basically, how the two payment systems or the two methods should coexist, and if then in which circumstances, no? So it's there already. I think my comment here is to expand a little bit and answer specifically how they should coexist. My second comment, it could be here a legal angle, and sorry for that, is related to the hybrid nature of money. As you said, you specify in the article that money has a public and a private nature, and you even mentioned the Planeta. You mentioned a literature on that, but your article is based on public money, on central bank money, and it could be benefit if you expand on the role of private money as well, because it will exist. It will exist, no? And especially, this is important for lawyers, the international private money, euro-dollar, for instance, how that would coexist with DOT. So a comment on expansion, perhaps, on the private aspect of money in your argument. The third aspect is perhaps the most important one, is the international angle or the international framework of DOT. This is the tricky part in my perspective. DOT is being discussed on a national perspective in many countries, but the international perspective is still a lot of doubts. And you mentioned some problems of the DOT. You mentioned the scalability trilemma, but there are also other challenges. And I think perhaps you could expand on that. For instance, in here I'm speaking about the national perspective, the privacy problem, which the Brazilian is not a problem per se, but the Brazilian case actually is a good segue perhaps for you. It's actually on my fourth comment that perhaps the Brazilian case could be a case study for you as well, because one of the tasks in Brazil is to solve the privacy puzzle, no? Mm-hmm. But going back to the international aspect of DOT, And here, again, I think perhaps you could spend a little bit. When I read your article, I thought about the analogy of a car. There is an amazing car, which is DOT, but where's the door? What's the best way to enter into the car from many angles? In the international perspective, it seems to be again the tricky part here. There is take the international perspective into consideration, the interoperability between CBDCs or interoperability between different currencies or between central bank currencies that run on DLT. So besides DVP, there is also PVP. So I would perhaps expand on PVP, and then it comes to a very basic element of PVP, which I'm not an economist, but it is a common sense. What is the exchange rate between the currencies, on how to solve this puzzle of exchange rate? There is another concept that I will explore in my article in a bit, which is the CBDC clusters situation. What if the geopolitical issue of CBDC, of central bank digital currency, who is going to engage with whom, in what circumstances, based on what incentives? So, just some high-level comments that I can send to you later, but the international perspective here, I think, is a piece that you could expand if you have time and space in your article. Fourth, a final comment, and here it's something that people who study central bank digital currency receives a lot, is what are actually the benefits of DOT? It's clearly a comment that we receive. Are there other technologies that can do the same? And if so, how? You mentioned quite with a lot of emphasis the atomic settlement feature, which basically means T+0. So you discharge someone from a debt at the same time. This is very relevant from the legal perspective and also the economy perspective. But are there other benefits? For sure there are many. The programmability, so maybe expand a little bit more on that. So your argument is not only atomic settlement. I know it's not only atomic settlement, but expand a bit more on that perhaps would be beneficial. On my last point is a methodology. Clearly, in my perspective, the case studies, it's super great. It's the highlight of your article, the case studies that you actually, there's a lot of findings there. So I would extract more from the case studies to your main argument. And perhaps, who knows, you take 3 examples from Europe, perhaps another example outside of Europe in your final article. And so those are my 4 comments. I hope was helpful to you. And thanks for the pleasure to read your paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Would like to have some time to
Yes.
the debate. Thank you. Go ahead. Oh, it's not on.
Yeah, I think it's on. Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Daniel, for your precious comments. I noted a lot of things here. I would start from a couple ones. So, the focus on the role of private money and the possibility of CBDC clusters. I will start with these 2. And here the answer is very easy, it's very immediate in the sense is thanks for the hint, in the sense that, of course, here is an occasion to debate and exchange ideas. So on this, I really say that I appreciate your hint, because there are some aspects that can really improve the work. So thank you very much, first of all, on this. Thank you also for pointing out the part on the initial comments on the legal framework. And here I am referring, for example, I mentioned the principle 9 of the principle for financial market infrastructures. Actually, also principle number 2 is on having a sound legal basis. So your perspective is more than fair in this context. You mentioned that it's a legal perspective, but now it's fully embedded in any economic discussion. So this is also a valid point. About the latest comments, I will start with the PVP that you were mentioning, so the payment versus payment and the exchange rate. Well, the focus I mentioned, you're correct, I focus on DVP, for example, and on atomic settlement, but here I take the chance to clarify that the exploratory work included as the business case is also PVP. So PVP has been explored. So delivery versus payment, payment versus payment, and also a lot of other cases. Reimbursement has been tested. So your point is fair, more than fair, and I can assure that the Eurosystem already took this consideration in mind, and they explore also the PVP. For the exchange rate, here the point is that, of course, the Eurosystem is using the same currency, so they didn't really explore. I mean, they also explored cross-border PVP, but it was not the main focus. But there are a lot of projects going on. For example, Project Meridian FX, project from the Bank of International Settlements, in which the 3 central banks, the solution provider central banks, are participating. So they are also exploring cross-border transaction. I can confirm, and it's also something that we can add in the work for sure. It would enrich our research. And then couple last things. You mentioned about analyzing also cases that are not European. And indeed, the paper presented here is part of a much larger work. And in this broader work, I explored also other cases. We had the SWIFT initiatives, so the private model. We had also Project Agora, Project Meridian. There are a lot of projects going on, and also a technical solution by a private company called Secros. So yes, your point is addressed, and maybe it can be included in an expansion of the work, but some work on this has already been done. Last but not least, on the advantages on the DLT side, something that could be further explored in the paper. From a central bank point of view, I would say that ultimately it will be the market participants that will tell you which are the real benefits of DLT. Clearly, it's not only atomic settlement, it's not only moving to a T+0 settlement cycle, it's also, for example, programmability on customer side. So in this sense, I would say that the Eurosystem tries to meet the private market demand. So the comment on the real advantages will be shown by the market, but you're perfectly right. And even though this is not the main concern, as from a policymaker point of view, because the advantages will be addressed by market, this could be included in the paper as well. Thank you very much for your comments, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuel. Sorry. I will open the floor for questions now. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. While you think about that, I will take the advantage of being moderator and make a question myself. In your paper, you mentioned the need of coexistence of private money and central bank money. That's a very important aspect, and we do agree with that. On the other hand, we have some tensions in there. For instance, the PFMI 9 states that you should use central bank money for settlement in FMIs. And what we see in the DLT trading space right now, that we could and should understand as FMIs, they are not settled in central bank money, then we need to find a solution to sort that out, to give more stability to the system. And then my question in that aspect, how is the best way to bring these initiatives together? Because we know that there's a fragmented market, different DLTs operating with different markets. How to bring that together? Have you been thinking about that, standardization or some sort of interoperability? And finally, related also to this matter of fragmentation, market fragmentation, we know that in this problem that we're trying to solve here, there are lots of network effects, important network effects, and the tendency would be a monopoly in a textbook solution for the problem. But to get into a monopoly is a messy path. How do you think that the work that you're doing could help into conducting and coordinating the economy in building this more open space? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Fabio, for your insightful questions. I will start with the last one. We'll start with the latter. So about the possibility of this, let's say, ending up in a monopoly. Well, first of all, I would say that we already have in certain ways a monopoly, in the sense that, of course, payment systems are actually a monopoly of central banks. Of course, not all payment systems, not everywhere, but in general, wholesale payment systems that are strategic and nationally or internationally relevant are already operated only by central banks. So the point is perfectly valid, but I think that is independent from whether we move to DLT or not. And of course, you were once again mentioning the very important the PFMIs, because they are very strict regulations. There is the European regulation for systemically important payment system, which is another European, it's not international, it's European, but legal framework that should be kept in mind. So I think that here the very important point is to maintain a high degree of market interaction. For example, I will make a practical example. The Eurosystem, its strategy consisted in call for interest, in a lot of discussions. If someone is interested, I can also indicate them the part of the ECB site where everything of this is stored. They had a so-called NTWCG, meaning New Technologies for Wholesale Central Bank Money Contact Group. It was the steering group that made as a service desk, let's say, bringing together the opinions from the Eurosystem and from the market participants. So I would say that the market participants had the possibility to express their needs. Now the point is ensuring that this dialogue still continues. This is for sure interesting to address. And they had a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, and there's agendas of at least, I think it was at least half a dozen or maybe more discussions, official interactions that they had. So I think that they opted for a quite good solution. For bringing participants together, this is also a very interesting question because nowadays there are a lot of international programs going on, and here I think that the key for interpretation, so the key of the answer is the fact that the three solution provider central banks and the Eurosystem, they are also, apart from exploring this solution in the exploratory work, they are participated as privileged observers in a lot of international projects. For example, in the Nexus project, for example, of course, this is slightly different, but still related. And one that I would absolutely mention, sometimes it gets a little bit overlooked, let's say, is the global layer 1. No one really talks about it, but it's very important. It's an international project started by the Monetary Authority of Singapore, and global layer 1 joins really participants together. So I think that this could be the key and also an interesting research avenue for practitioners, for me, and for policymakers as well.
Well, thank you, Manuel. If we don't have any, we have a question.
Thank you for your presentation. It was a great point of view. I would like you to explore a little further the reasons to use DLTs in the presented cases, because instead of centralized solutions, because you mentioned a lot of advantages, but the main advantage of a DLT, the disintermediation, and I might be wrong here, it's not an objective, because the validation nodes still would be controlled by the central bank. And speed and efficiency, and again, I may be outdated here, but speed and efficiency and centralized solutions still presents higher transactions per second rates than DLTs, and verifiability, transparency, automation, resilience. You can achieve all of this in a centralized solution. So including T+0 atomic settlement. So I would like you to explore a little further the reasons to use DLTs and not centralized solutions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a comment here. Well, first of all, it's a great stream to explore, for sure. If I might just say, here the point is that it's not necessarily the Eurosystem wanting to move to a DLT system. It's the market that is, the private market is asking for having the target system for central bank money settlement that they should be compatible with their market DLT. So, I mean, when you talk about the validation nodes, they would not be controlled or owned by the Eurosystem or the ECB. The DLT part would still be all on the client side, on the participant side, so all on the market side. Let's say the interoperability link would just be at the very end of the chain for completing, for settling in central bank money. But the rest of the transaction would be all on private side. So when validation, decentralization, and everything would still rely on the market DLT. The problem is not that the Eurosystem wants its own DLT, it's to make his systems speak with other people DLT. So, but nevertheless, valid point for expanding the research. Thank you very much. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We are out of time. We should move to the second paper. To present distributed ledger technology as payment infrastructure, I invite Danielle to take the floor. Thank you, Danielle.
Here again, the disclaimer is valid. So speaking from a legal perspective, it's very important to say that among economists. And another disclaimer is this is a work in progress. So it's somehow a polemic paper, and so I expect to hear some comments in discussion, because we're in the process of polishing. So it's one of the reasons why we sent the paper to a conference. No? So I will start from the end. So I actually will, my intro will actually be the key. I will present the key elements of the article. So I hope it gets the main argument, it gets more clear to you and what we are trying to achieve and what's the context that we are speaking. So the first statement that we make in this article, that currently international payment systems, they rely heavily on private-led infrastructure. So, and we call this, in this payment infrastructure, they are a part of a concept that we mentioned as international monetary system, which is built upon public laws, of course, a lot of public laws, but also private laws. And the legal framework is not neutral. So in this context, institutions like SWIFT, CHIPS, for messaging, for settlements, they're critical infrastructure providers in this private-led infrastructure. They are actually, they're not doing a passive role. They are creating the rules of the game. They are creating and drafting when and how, in which circumstances, the payments should happen. And the question of the article is, what would happen with DOT? What this context would change if we introduce, if we create a central bank digital currency? What would change into this private infrastructure, and also what would change into the monetary sovereignty? And this is the approach of the article. We argue, the main argument of the article is that by doing so, DOT could change a bit on how the international payment infrastructure happens. From a private institutions, from a private-led institutions, to a more state-centric, or at least to a more public technological approach. And on this regard, we also argue that central bank digital currency has a geopolitical meaning, a clear geopolitical meaning on international level. And this is the provocation of the article, and where we want to explore. And then we analyze the MBridge project, which was fostered by the BIS, as an example on how a multi-CBDC project could actually work on this framework that I mentioned. So this is the key elements of the article. So I'm going to explore each of them individually. And the first concept that I would like to make sure that we are on the same page is international monetary system. So international monetary system is not framed by us in this. Actually, there's another disclaimer that I forgot to mention, that I wrote this article and co-authored with Professor Camila Duran from France. So this is very important, and sorry that I didn't mention at the beginning. So the international monetary system is not a concept created by us. There is a literature on that. It's referred also as a known system or a private legal order, but basically it means that is an institutional framework that guides the monetary interaction between states and institutions. The second element of the international monetary system is the hybrid nature of the monetary system. As we're discussing now, the monetary system has a private and a legal type of money, and also a private and public type of money, and also a private and public type of infrastructure. So it's hybrid in its nature, either from the legal nature of the money and also the infrastructure of the pumbling on where this money flows. So in a nutshell, we argue that international monetary system, they're not, the payment infrastructure, they are not neutral financial devices. They actually establish the technological and the legal standards and the rules of the game and the framework where the money should flow in many circumstances. So based on the international monetary system concept, we built on the private infrastructure of the global payment infrastructure. So we argue that the global payment infrastructure is built on top of three elements. The first one is the euro-dollar market. I'm aware that for economists, euro-dollar is not that important, as I spoke with many economists on that before. But for lawyers, it is, because it's actually a liability issued outside of a national territory, outside of, in this case, outside of the US. So it is an agreement, a legal agreement, but a liability issued by global banks outside of US. So it is important from a legal perspective in the context of the globalization of finance, and there is a literature on that. So this is the first element that we mention as the private aspect of the current global payment infrastructure. The second one is the SWIFT network. As we know, the SWIFT network is a private association. It's a messaging platform, but it's the backbone of global financial communication nowadays. And the SWIFT network is also not neutral. They actually create, again, I'm going to mention that a couple of times, the rules of the game. And the chips. The third element of this global private global payment infrastructure is the chips, which is for settlements in the US, is the clearing house, and is fundamental for international transfers in US dollars. It processes average of 2 trillion domestic and international payments daily, almost 2 trillion. So based on these three elements, we argue that the three components, it creates a private-led payment infrastructure, and in our perspective, they are not, this infrastructure is not political neutral. It has geopolitical impact. It's impossible to mention the global payment infrastructure without making reference to monetary sovereignty. As lawyers like the concepts and definitions, so the monetary sovereignty definition from a very basic legal perspective is the possibility, the authority to define a legal tender in a specific country, and also the governance of creating infrastructures, the control of monetary supply, and determination of interest rates. As the literature argue that currently and after the globalization of finance, and especially after the dominance of US dollar, this sovereignty, this monetary sovereignty has some constraints, and it leads to an unequal distribution of monetary sovereignty, simply because some states has the political power to extend their monetary sovereignty beyond their own countries, and the US is the classical example here. Based on all this, based on the concept of international monetary system and monetary sovereignty, we lead to and we go to the very important concept for our argument of payment infrastructure geopolitics. We say that establishing a payment, a technological and legal standards for infrastructure has become a decisive political tool in the global finance system or in the international monetary system. We argue that it goes beyond a passive apparatus of sending and receiving money. It creates the rules of the game, when and how we should send this money. This payment infrastructure geopolitics has 4 elements in our perspective that I'll go really quick, but basically it encompasses the strategic control on what advantages you have to use one infrastructure or other. It's also related to the legal framework, as I mentioned before. In our perspective, the legal rules, they're not, again, neutral. They are a constitutive part of this legal framework, and it matters if it's public or private law creating the rules. It's very important which type of rule, which type of legal rule we're talking about. A third point that is related to the payment infrastructure geopolitics is by accepting a payment infrastructure, you're also accepting their rules and their technology framework. It could be obvious, but we cannot forget that. You are accepting the is not a good concept, but the back end of the infrastructure, basically the rules and the technology. And lastly, it's again the payment infrastructure geopolitics is related to infrastructural power. When we are using a specific payment infrastructure, perhaps you are giving a political message or receiving a political message. So there is this geopolitical element that we think is important. Based on all this, we ask, what would be with DOT? What would happen if we start to make central transactions on top of a blockchain or a DOT framework? As the other authors were saying in the discussion, there are some basic advantages of using a DOT central bank money. A DOT central bank money, it's also a liability of the central bank. It has a legal tender status. But I'm not going into the advantages. I think we spoke about that before. But basically, the programmability, the atomic settlement, instant and conditional exchanges of assets with payments, and also the security features. We cannot forget that, and it's going to be very important for our argument, the interoperability piece. Central bank digital currencies has this interoperability advantage, and I'm speaking about here wholesale payments. So it's very important to discuss whether this interoperability piece has the, let's say, the geopolitical space to work as it should. Taking the DOT, the central bank digital currency, from a national perspective, there are some doubts, but I believe there is a segue. But from an international perspective, there seems to be a lot of doubts, especially from this geopolitical approach that we're trying to say here. And on this context, it seems that the BIS, and I have spoken with some members of the BIS here, the BIS has been a special arena, a special place where these discussions are being fostered between countries, between central banks, to actually enable this international framework of multi-CBDC platform. So countries that can issue its own central bank digital currency, but can exchange between each other with different currencies. And it seems that the BIS and the BIS Innovation Hub that's established in 2019, but before that, there are many other projects that were equally important. Seems that the BIS Hub is being especially important in this coordination framework of countries and central banks that are willing to explore this multi-CBDC, this multi-central bank digital currency platform. And the project AMI Bridge is a very good example, and we take that as a case study in our article. The AMI Bridge is a milestone because it's a multi-central bank digital currency platform. It was created with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, Central Bank of China, Thailand, and United Arab Emirates. It was built on top of a native blockchain platform, the AMI Bridge ladder, and we cannot forget it had a unique framework. All the institutions, all the nodes, the central banks were bound by a contract, the AMI Bridge platform terms, that created the rules of these exchanges and of this platform. So the legal framework was well put to make this platform works. We also mentioned the BRICS bridge, and there's nothing to do with the BIS. The BRICS bridge was a mention, and I put here in purpose to maybe to receive some questions on that. It's clearly not a project. Maybe it's not nothing. Maybe it's just someone speaking without any rationale. But some presidents of the BRICS has mentioned the the BRICS bridge that would be built on a top of blockchain platform. So, and it clear has a geopolitical meaning, you know, to be able to use their own payment system, their own payment infrastructure, and not the, let's say, Western payment infrastructure. So even though the BRICS bridge is not even a product, it clearly has geopolitical meaning, even though there's not even a paper, and to be honest, I don't think this will fly somehow. So the DOT and the use of multi-central bank currencies platform like the EMI bridge, in our perspective, and here comes the argument of the article, it could have the potential to shift from private payment infrastructure to a more state-centered infrastructure. So this is the main argument of the paper. And of course, even though public and private money would need to coexist, in this multi-CBDC platform, the government authorities would play a larger authority instead of private institutions. And at the end, this could mean a potential reliance on euro-dollar markets, who knows, US dollars, and Western payment infrastructure. Of course, there are challenges. Of course, there are challenges on this approach. And I guess one of the main challenges is the concept of CBDC clusters, which is basically the fragmentation problem. You know? How the interoperability between countries would work if there are many clusters of central bank digital currencies working together and not among all of them. So the fragmentation problem for international transfers with central bank digital currency could be a challenge, and this is being highlighted by some of the literature on this aspect. I'm running out of time, but it's the basic question of this paper is: can DOT reshape the international monetary system? Can DOT actually move the needle on monetary sovereignty? And it seems that the DOT may represent a significant shift from a private-led infrastructure, payment infrastructure, to a more public payment system, and therefore challenging the dominance, perhaps, of the euro-dollar and the institutions that we use as a payment infrastructure nowadays. Happy to receive any comment and happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I would like to invite Xavier to debate the paper.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting the paper, and thank you everyone for bearing with us. So I will try to provide some comments on this paper by Camilla and Daniel. First, a summary of the paper, but close to what we have heard. The current international monetary system is dollar-centric and relying on several components, and the ones that are highlighted in the paper are euro-dollar, SWIFT, and CHIPS. The main idea that's presented is the focus of their new platform that are proposed. So it's a bit morpho. You see, it's one bold expression is multi-CBDC DLT-based public regional platform. It's just one expression, and this is a new type of platform that are being explored. So with the BRICS bridge and M-bridge, and that could change and impact the monetary system. In particular, I think something that's important in the paper is the focus is monetary sovereignty. And in the end, how countries will have more control over their monetary system, less about their policy itself, more about the control on the payment system, but that has obviously implication one on the other. And finally, an important element of this paper is that it is viewed through the eyes of infrastructural geopolitics. So looking at what are the infrastructures, what are the different actors and stakeholders, and how that influence the power dynamics. A strong strength of this paper, the first one is the interdisciplinary approach. So I understand that the two authors are lawyers, but they managed to also look a little bit at the governance, at the technology. So I think it's a really good strength. Especially, I think, in these kind of topics, you need to look at all the dimensions together. So it's challenging and it's difficult in terms of methodology to find the right way to look at it. But if we don't embrace the complexity of this system, I think we are missing the most important part. So I really appreciate the effort of this paper of trying to look from different angles at a complex endeavor. We have seen also, and that was clear in the presentation, I think the lawyer background helps of having clear definition, and I think that helps because in these domains there is a lot of new concepts, new ideas that are appearing, and it's good to be methodic on defining each term over the paper. And to me, something that was the most interesting and probably the thing where I really learned is the demonstration of monetary sovereignty dynamics. For instance, explaining if you're a country that don't have a strong currency and you need to do international trade, you need to use someone else's money and infrastructure, and all of a sudden you're in a different, you have new constraints that are added to your system. I think it's interesting to show all these dynamics. Yes. So now a little bit the parts where I think that there is room for improvement. First, the counterpart of trying to look at all the complexity of the system is that you quickly have a problem of scope. There is many dimensions to what we are talking, and at some point we could be talking about any payment anywhere and every system because everything is connected. So this is where you need in your paper to try to find an angle. For instance, one example is retail and wholesale CBDC. So they are discussed in the beginning of the paper, but then they are carried along in the paper when we are mostly talking about settlement and international payments. And that leads to some, for instance, concept like legal tender, for instance, which is really poorly relevant at the wholesale level, but is highly relevant at the retail level. So do people accept my money? And so it's an interesting topic, but it's one that parasites other problems where we are at a higher level. Same, the international monetary system, so it's a set of arrangements, but it's also infrastructures. And we shift sometimes between the global view of all these more political aspect and then to the concrete infrastructure that make it work. And it's not always clear how we shift. One also point is CHIPS and SWIFT that are presented as two key pillars of international system, but I think they have very different type of governance and very different profile in terms of its significance. So that's one thing that could be clarified. And overall, all these international monetary system had several components and clarify the relative influence of each of them. And also because and we'll go back to it, you use them to describe both as private, but there are different type of private. One is a company, one is a sort of international association, non-profit based in Brussels, so with a very different profile of governance. To the core of the paper, something that's key is to look at really this platform and the current geopolitics of it. So for instance, if we look at mBridge and BRICS, you mentioned it, but I think that should be clarified is all the governance challenges. What's something that's good in the paper is you see how they have emerged, what have been the discussion, and some extract from discourse to understand exactly why they appeared. But currently we are in a very interesting situation in both, where they are both having trouble. And if I had to make a paper to say how these platforms are not possible or desirable or something, I would use them as an example to show like, okay, at the moment we have challenges with them. So I think maybe to look a little bit at beyond what was promised and look at where we are now, it would be interesting. Also, something that's missing is the alternative clusters with the shared infrastructures. And I will take as a main example Buna. Buna is a regional payment system set up by the Arab Monetary Fund. And so it allows to do settlements between different currencies of the region. So it's the same kind of ideas of mBridge and BRICS, but it works. It's working well in the region. It's expanding currently. So I think it would be interesting to see another profile of this kind of cluster and compare it. Another thing that's interesting is, as you look at monetary sovereignty, and it's very an interesting topic, is to look also at alternative strategies. So we are talking here about the one with having a CBDC, but there are alternative routes. For instance, I mentioned this paper from Bertou and Ponso about China. It has a very complex strategy of not just promoting yuan as an international currency, but also providing some infrastructures to facilitate settlement in yuan, but being subtle about it. Like the purpose is not to replace existing global infrastructure, but provide alternative in some cases for different profile of countries. And so I think that would be interesting to compare these different strategies and how they work. And finally, you have a quote in the paper that I absolutely love. No existing technology has significantly disrupted the concentration of infrastructural power, and you associate it with this paper. I feel like that's super strong, but then I would love to see more of the conclusion in the paper, because how much there is ingrained infrastructural power that will make it difficult to change, how any change management would be difficult, and also how much technology can help with that or not. So yes, I think this quote itself could deserve a paper. Yes. So to finish on this and maybe summarize some of the points, I think the view that's presented in the paper is that there is a new option on the table, which would be a public infrastructure that uses the national currencies, that is DLT based, and that it works at the regional level. And indeed, this is one of the new options. But I think your paper would be stronger if you were to explore for each of these dimensions whether there is really benefits regarding monetary sovereignty, if that is the key goal. So for instance, public infrastructure versus private infrastructure. So we see in the US, for instance, relying on stablecoin, purely private, that expand the role of the dollar internationally without any intervention of the governments. National currency versus international currencies. I know, for instance, some countries like Cambodia have a complex, or Argentina, they have a complex relationship with the national currency and using also the dollar. It's not, their sovereignty doesn't always rely on promoting their national currency, because that might have a side effect economically. I'm not an economist, but I understand that there might be challenges. So it would be interesting to see how much it's desirable or not to shift from one to the other. DLT-based versus conventional technologies. So again, that's linked to the quote, like how much a DLT is really helping on that, and I will discuss a little bit further on talking about programmability. And then regional versus global or national level, which I think to me is, and that's maybe to finish on one personal opinion, probably the strongest new trend we see. This regional level of infrastructure is particularly promising because it allows an environment of different countries that have similar interests to work, but it is challenging. It has a lot of geopolitics in it, and definitely that's one of the key challenges. So yeah, thank you for this great paper. I think I'm done. And very happy to discuss this further.
Thank you, Xavier. Danielle, please.
Thank you, Xavier, for the excellent, insightful comments. There are many of them, but let me on the chips and SWIFT. I agree. It's important to not put in the same bucket different institutions, and in this type of a discussion that we need to go deep. I agree that the governance are different, and therefore it could impact in a different way. Indeed, a very good element. Regarding alternative clusters with shared infrastructure, Buna, I read little about this, so very excellent element. One thing that we've been we've been challenged already is the same question I made to Emmanuel, is the LT the only solution? No, is there other solutions? I think all of us think about this all the time. Why we're doing this? Why we're proposing the DOT solution? And I believe the advantages are more important than the challenges, or the advantages worth the challenges. Regarding, I want you to stay a little bit on the quote that you mentioned. No existing technology has significantly disrupted the concentration of power, which is a very bold statement. And to expand on that, I think that's the core, in my perspective, the core element that we need to enhance in the article, which how actually the DOT framework would disrupt the concentration of power. How that would actually change how we are using the current private payment infrastructure, and also thinking about how those private institutions like SWIFT are building its own DOT platform, as mentioned by Manuel. Would that mean something? Would that mean also another power that is already there and it's perhaps easier to use instead of a native blockchain? So all those questions is indeed relevant. And your comment made me think that we need to explore a little bit more the SWIFT proposal for DOT. It's clear, And finally, those are the comments that I took note. And finally, the table that you have put together, which is good to think, the differentiation between public and private infrastructure, the national, international currency, DOT, and conventional, regional, and on a global level. And it's very hard to put all these elements in a paper together, as you know. But I think one good way here would be to make the definitions more clear, to understand what the reader is reading and where the direction of the paper is going. So I thank you for the comments. I think I went through all of them, and I thank you especially for this, for making the existing technology code more highlighted. So I think this is a very good hint on to explore on that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for questions. I will start with one. I think that one thing that's very important in this ecosystem is fragmentation. And you mentioned that in your paper. On the other hand, you said that the interoperability among CBDCs may be facilitated, but when you delve more into the problem, you end up in a scenario of CBDC clusters, and I think that's something very important. We have also the tension between the private law and the private international law and public law. The Commission in Hague has started a discussion on wholesale payments, tokenized wholesale payments and tokenized assets. Then I think that in this scenario where we need to reconcile lots of different aspects, do you see any advantage in the technology that could help us to sort that out, or the problem is much more related to the regulatory and the legal framework?
It's a very important question, and I will start with the fragmentation piece. Indeed is a problem that we mentioned, and not us. There is a literature on CBDC clusters. But CBDC clusters could also mean a good thing. And here I want to emphasize perhaps the role of the multilateral institutions like the BIS, who was able to foster the communication and the relationship between different central banks to actually move from a POC to actually make a real transaction, which is the case of EMI Bridge. So CBDC clusters has a double meaning. It could mean fragmentation, but also could mean the opportunity to create bonds between central banks in different countries. The pessimist approach is the creation of many and different CBDC clusters. But if you look at the optimist approach, is that perhaps the multilateral institutions like the BIS could help to foster the bonds between all those countries and CBDC clusters. And this is clearly related to a political meaning. And regarding to the technological versus legal framework, from the EMI Bridge experience, it was clear that the legal framework was very important. The discussion of the terms of the legal framework was super important. I would say not more than technology, but equally important. So sorry for the answer, but both are equally important, at least from what we've seen.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the floor? If not, we're going to move into the third paper. But before moving on, I would like to request some help here because we lost the feedback of time in the TV. It went out. Thank you. And now I call Silvia. The floor is yours.
Okay, so welcome for the last talk of this excellent three-day conference. Probably a bit different in style than the prior presentation. So yes, happy to conclude those 3 days here. So this paper was written and fed by experience had with the IMF over the last 4 years, helping countries thinking in how they could improve their payment system. And also had help from my co-author, Nicolas Zeng, that's not with us today, that has worked before at JP Morgan and had a hands-on experience of how banks can integrate new services, how APIs internally in the banks and connected to the rest of the world function. So that helped a lot the paper. It's a foundational paper. I try to clarify some definition. One of the secret questions we try to answer that is lingering in what we discussed before is also, do we need a DLT or not when we are a country and we want to improve our payment system? And the short answer is no, but, and I will try to explain that to you today. So first, why we need to talk about programmability. As I said, a lot of countries are considering how to improve their payment and settlement infrastructures, and in particular, they're considering to add programmability features. That's the case of India, for instance, that has this UPI system, but also a CBDC project. The Bank of England that considered programmability as part of their digital pound. The Philippines that currently are working on a wholesale CBDC that would allow at the same time to issue government bonds and facilitate the trading directly of these bonds. And the European system has been presented. And of course, I couldn't not mention Brazil that has been, I think, on the forefront of this. Both having established a PIX system that is based on a series of APIs that facilitate a lot of communication and the building of new services, and the new exploration with Drex that Fabio led that looks at all the options that are on the table to provide advanced programmability. So it's probably one of the countries that is the best to give this talk. What also motivated the paper is there are confusion in the meaning of programmability. People have different sense of it, and we try to clarify a little bit. That's why this paper tries to be foundational, so it doesn't bring advanced new knowledge. It just try to clarify the landscape. And I think that programmability will have a lot of impact economically, technologically, legally, and so it's important to look at it. You can see that in every report currently looking at CBDC, we mention programmability as one of the key elements, but we don't explicit what it will mean, what it will imply, why is it important. It's still an unexplored area. So first, let's try to define a programmability by not talking about programmability, but talking about a music box. So you all know a music box. It's this small box that can be in wood, in plastic, and you have a cylinder in the middle in metal that has spikes, and when you turn the crank, the melody runs. So this is not a programmable system at all. It's the opposite of programmable, because you cannot change the music. It's already there, it's set up, and you can just activate it, and it works as it was designed by the manufacturer. We have, however, in the music world, an example of something that's slightly more programmable in the two meanings I will try to explain. A sound system, you can plug different speakers on it, so you can choose also an amplifier, and you can connect different together. And you can also change the tune, thankfully, so you can have different discs that work into it. Any digital system could be programmable. So if we go back to a digital system, for instance, if we look at an iPhone, a smartphone, you know that the first version of the iPhone didn't have application. It had already built-in application. You remember that famous Steve Jobs presentation where he would say that it has an iPod, a smartphone, and a phone, an iPod, and an internet browser, I think. And that was the three features, and it was only 3 apps, and they were all together in the same. But that was only provided by Apple. What changed over the years is they allowed third-party actors to provide application on top of this platform. And that changed all of a sudden the use you have of your phone, because now a new actor can participate in the ecosystem of your smartphone. This is what we are talking about when we talk about programmability. It's the fact that you allow third-party actors access features of your system. So you see the two questions. The first question is, who can provide applications? So if it's only the manufacturer or the initial issuer, it's not programmable. It's still, the manufacturer can program it, but you cannot, as a third party, provide a program. And the second key question is, what kind of feature they can access? For smartphone, you know that there is a challenge, especially in the Euro system currently, like people cannot access the smart element of the Apple devices, so you cannot use it to do offline payment currently, because as third-party actors, you cannot directly access to the secure element. So that's a challenge, like how much you allow third-party actors. The more you allow them, the more risk you take, but also the more useful become the application that you put on the platform. In the payment and settlement system, just to set the landscape, that was already quite well explained before, we are not just talking about programs, we talk about liabilities that are transferred, so the stakes are a bit higher, I would say, because we are not just exchanging information, we are converting a legal claim. So for instance, you go to a restaurant, you need to pay, and then that's converted in a payment, and the payment, it becomes a different type of claim. All of a sudden, it's a debt you need to pay, and that's finally settled through the system. So it changed a bit the nature. And also something that we distinguish a little bit is payment and settlements, because in programmability, it has a different implication. So there are two definitions we found of programmability that are used jointly. One is external access, is how much external actor can connect to your system and access to the feature of the system. So in the equivalent in the music devices would be the plugging the different jack. Typically, you can have a payment and settlement system that has an API that facilitates this kind of use of the payment and settlement system as a third-party actors. This is where the example of PIX is interesting, because by the central bank stepping in and providing one standardized interface, then you facilitate for every actor, every bank, every private actor to use that. This was the original idea of open banking, but we all know it kind of failed, partly because the interfaces were not fully harmonized enough. So every bank would come up with their own interface, so then it would be a nightmare for a startup to connect to the different APIs. In the paper we mentioned there has been an interesting study on UK open banking, looking at why it didn't work. And only a few intermediaries have been able to connect to the different APIs and then provide a unified API in the middle. So, yeah. What can we do with external access? So I think quite a lot already. So we can automate it, highway toll, for instance, have recurring payment, all sorts of promises we associate with more advanced system. Just by having an internet access, you can do that. But also important is interoperability. So open banking in general, fast payment system bridge, Nexus has been mentioned before. So this is a regional project in Asia based on already the interlinking of different fast payment systems. And by simply having a one API gateway, every payment system can be connected to the other and facilitate a lot of payment in the region. The second vision of programmability is internal capabilities. So internal capabilities is the fact that you can put your own program in the system. The simple version of that is just conditional payments. Conditional payment is just I can add only one thing to the payment system. I just say I want this payment to happen in these conditions. So that would be the most simple version of it. For instance, this is an example of something I've built making an atomic settlement in the end between the blockchain and the digital euro infrastructure that provide conditional payments and providing at the end atomic settlements. Very close to what was mentioned, the TIPS hash link system. It's just you can connect to system as long as you can on the both add the condition of like lock the fund until something happens, then you can trigger the payment. Yes, but the more advanced of these internal capabilities is smart contracts. Smart contracts are not so magical. It's just more advanced program that you deploy in the infrastructure, and then the infrastructure is going to deploy to you. So back to the question, do we need a DLT? Not at all. What you need is to allow third-party actors to deploy programs in your infrastructure. Currently, it's not possible in most banking system and most payment and settlement system because the way they are designed, and this is why my co-author was extremely helpful, is like it is too difficult to reorganize that. That's why everyone is considering shifting to DLTs because all of a sudden we have a clear and clean new system. So it works better for doing that, but we could do it in the same way by just having all servers, having a separate service that allows some programmability features, and as was also mentioned by Emanuele, you could have an intermediary layer, keep your payment and settlement system the same, and have an intermediary server where external programs are hosted, and that then use the external programmability of your payment system. And the most advanced version of it, we know, is what happened on permissionless blockchain, where everyone can deploy a program, and the program can be complex and advanced. And then they can interact with each other. What we get with that, so atomic settlement, that has been discussed several times this morning. Composability hasn't been discussed, but as you can deploy different programs in the same environment, then they can be connected to each other with perfect guarantee of execution. And that becomes interesting. That's what we see in decentralized finance that is definitely promising. You can have a clear link between a collateral and then the lending operation and everything in one system that ensures the guarantees. And then we have more advanced usage, programmable wallets, multi-pronged operation, so it's one operation that does several things in the same one operation, so it's a DVP on multiple layers. Programmable compliance, there has been an interesting BIS project on this, so ingraining the compliance within the system itself, and programmable assets. I will stay a couple of minutes on programmable assets because I think that's one of the most, where we see the most interesting innovation at the moment. So programmable assets, I see two case we could discuss. One is what is called programmable money or different other names where you would have control over how some type of money would be spent in the end. There is a lot of political debate around it. What I find interesting is like it's absolutely not new. We already have, for instance, in Italy, the check cultura, so you get a funding of 500 euros as a 18 years old that you can spend on cultural things. There is also a very interesting case in the US, which is US food stamps. So they have been designed to ensure food security initially, so they were just here to allow you to buy food. The only rule was you couldn't buy warm meals, because the idea that going to a restaurant is a different type of need. If you need basic food, you should just buy at the grocery shop. But over time, there have been debates about how can we also enforce to not allow people to buy soda with it, and is it helpful? And there is a very interesting literature, and I'm currently writing on this, that looks, is it beneficial to ingrain these incentives and constraints directly in the payment system or not? And yeah, I mean, in the device. And so the idea with programmability is the more programmable is your payment system, the more advanced this kind of program you could create, and easily. The Check Cultura is already digital, but it is one program that required years of development to reach there. If we have the infrastructure directly available within the payment system, we could create a lot of different programs using this kind of system. Yes, I shortcut, but just be careful that there is a lot of political tension on this topic and also economic question around it. The second case of programmable assets that is interesting is what we heard about tokenization. So tokenization is the idea of using this programmable feature to just deploy an asset on a new platform. Here, we should distinguish what's really happening. Some thing that's important is that in some cases, the asset is transferred on this new infrastructure, and so it simplifies the way you handle it. In some cases, we create an intermediary layer, so you create a fund, SPV, and then this fund is the one that's tokenized. And in some cases, we have tokens that are issued, but don't really are fully legally bound with the initial assets. And so all of this create a lot of new challenges and difficulties. Just something to bear in mind with these new capabilities. But going back to programmability and wrapping it up. So we have these two dimensions I explained. One is external access, how much anyone can access this platform. And on the other axis, we have internal capabilities. How much complex is the program I can deploy on the platform? On the two extremes, we have a legacy closed system, so any system as they exist currently, no one can access it. Even, I would say, target services is an example. Most infrastructure provided by central banks are only available to a limited number of participants. And the capabilities of programming them is limited. I can only access some feature, but I generally cannot deploy a program on it. On the other end of the spectrum, we have this permissionless programmable blockchain, right? You can deploy anything and any program, and anyone can do it. So that's the two extremes. And because in institutions like IMF, we are very moderate, we try to see where is the middle ground between the two. And this is the landscape we see. So maybe starting from below, you see on the first one is open banking. Open banking is just improving the external access to the programmability feature without complexifying them, so you just enhance access in the first layer. A little bit further is unified interface. So this is for me what PIX is, or UPI in India, which exactly the name says, more or less this, where the public sector provides a little bit more than just one API. It's a one unified API, and with more advanced feature. With UPI in India, for instance, they propose to create vouchers, they propose to create conditional payments, so already the interface is quite advanced and goes beyond just triggering payments. Then we have all these conditional payments, all the different variants of it that we discussed. And then permission programmable ledgers, so all these ideas of creating interfaces, blockchain DLTs among a network of participants that would have more advanced feature. An intermediary between the permissionless blockchain and the permission programmable ledger, there is permission smart contracts. So, and there is also a layer 2 solution. So you can use public blockchain and then on top of it add your own rules and create your own controls over it. So then you create a more restrained environment within public infrastructure. So there are a lot of nuances on how you do that. That's my conclusion. Programmability includes external, internal capabilities. Tokenization leverage these capabilities to represent assets with different aspects. And the most important to me, and going back also to the question of DLT or not, it's not about the technology you use, it's about how much you open your infrastructure, how much you have standardized interface, and transparent condition to access it, because it cannot be open to everyone, but it should be transparent on how, as a startup, can I join the payment and settlement infrastructure. Also then, how robust is the infrastructure? Like if I add more feature to it, is it not gonna break? and then if I provide more advanced features and so more advanced programs into it. So that's, I think, the most important for us, and this is how we conclude the paper. This is the feature we should be looking for, and not talking about the specific technology first, because this is what will, in the end, provide potential economic benefits. But going into next direction, to me, and it's an open call for all of you, I would love to explore more the exact economic impact of these features. So we see there are potentially something interesting with this smart contract, this conditional payment, but I haven't found yet good literature on like measuring the exact benefits of all of this. We had a good presentation 2 days ago about account receivable, like by legally standardizing them and providing a process, it may facilitate trade. I think we need more of these, of looking really concretely, is there an economic benefit on all these features, or are we just building a machinery for nothing? So this is an open call for any one of you, if you want to work on this. And that's it. So this is the papers, if you want to scan and have the and I'm done.
Thank you, Xavier. Now I invite Morel to debate the paper.
Okay, so once again, thank you very much for giving me the possibility to discuss on this very interesting paper. Actually, we have the possibility to exchange some very good ideas with Xavier during this day, so it was very fruitful for sure. And I also know that I stand between you and the end of the event and the lunch, so I will try to be concise while addressing my points. First of all, congrats to Xavier for doing a very interesting work. It was very useful and insightful to read this paper. I prepared some comments that are some maybe genuine questions or doubts or possible suggestions for further research. They are not really comments on, there's nothing, in my opinion, that was wrong, or it was very, very, very well done. I think that the structure is really one of the main features of this paper. The readability of this paper was very high. Let me just start. Okay, here's a brief outline of what we were going to see. I will not try to resume all the paper at the beginning and then address my questions. I will try to do section for section, a little bit of a summary and a little bit of comments. So, general introduction, some general remarks here. One of the valuable contributions that has been given by this paper to the reader is, first of all, a clear definition of programmability, defined as the capability to perform financial operation through logic implemented in computer programs. And as Xavier was mentioning, as Daniel also told us, from legal perspective is always important. So definitions are very important, and this is a first remarkable aspect of the paper. Also, from my personal point of view, because of course the discussion is also a little bit personal, I found it particularly interesting the relevance in the wholesale domain. So once again, delivery versus payment application, payments versus payment, cross-border transaction, and everything that concerns this aspect. About the methodology used here, was quite interesting, and it's the methodology itself that makes the paper more readable and insightful, because Xavier and the other author, Nicolas, they explored programmability through its two key dimensions. The external access, so who and how can access a certain function or program, and the internal capabilities, so the automatic execution of programs once certain predefined conditions are met. And a valid strategy that's found throughout all the paper is the provision of real-world examples, so the open banking, the distributed ledger technology, fast payments, which are a very hot topic today, and also the global layer 1 that's been mentioned by me also, and in the paper as well by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Okay, so starting from the external programmatic access dimension, it has been defined as the access to data or functions by external participants. And here I have two questions. Actually, they are genuine questions out of curiosity by reading the paper. You spoke a lot about interfaces and APIs. So my immediate reaction is thinking about user to application side. So graphical user interface and user to application, so U2A. Do you plan on exploring something related on A2A, so application to application, so meaning messages instead of graphical user interface? And second, you mentioned client-side programmability as opposed to bank-side programmability. Does something change? If it does, while we consider a bank as clients, for example, with the central bank being a solution provider or service provider, and the bank, the commercial bank that usually is the provider, in this case would be the client, the customer. Do you think that there could be something also to explore in this way? And also appreciated the reference to the target access guidelines, because, and here once again, the bond between economy and law, because clearly external programmatic access depends on the system itself, so on the IT functions, but also on legal criteria for access. And this should be something that we should keep in mind, keep into consideration, because IT, we can do everything, basically, almost everything. So programmability can reach very high levels, but then there's also limits that are imposed not by the technology, rather than by regulation. Internal programmatic capabilities. So the second dimension of programmability, very important here is the atomicity, defined as the technical automation with conditional logic, so without the need for intermediation. And from a business point of view, we go back to the concept of atomic settlement that has been quite explored already today. Here, in my opinion, just a very small room for improvement in the paper. I didn't see a clear definition because of course for technical expert is super clear, but maybe for someone that's not so deep into the discussion, it could be good to have a definition of interoperability, because you provided a very good definition of programmability, but not of interoperability. So just a suggestion from my side, for example, based on the BIS definition, defining interoperability as a technical and or legal compatibility between systems and or mechanisms. But this is, I think, the only real comment from me. Moving towards the conclusion, you studied how to improve programmability, and there has been a very insightful focus on the hybrid models that can be evaluated along the two dimensions of programmability. The nice graph that you show us from completely closed systems, legacy system, to completely open, so to a permissionless programmable blockchain. And here just a question that can be answered now or later. It's more really just for future research avenue. How a European unified ledger would be positioned in your opinion on this graph that you show us? And also, as you mentioned already, notable cases to monitor programmable money from the Direx here in Brazil to the digital rupiah, and also recent studies from the Central Bank of Israel on the digital shekel. That could be both wholesale and retail dimensions, so it could be interesting to further explore regarding programmability in money. Moving on, almost there. The paper stands out for being very clear and very deep, and it's very well structured, and it shows that programmability is gaining momentum, but he still has to reach its potential. The potential has not been reached yet, but this is something that will be for sure addressed by researchers and technical experts in the next months, years. And so the paper, in my opinion, is useful for policymakers, for technical experts, but also for researchers, because it's always good to have research also on very technical issues, in my opinion. And I conclude with some personal thoughts about what could be some interesting application of smart contracts and on programmability, for example. Some real-world example, for example, in customs. So automated goods release at frontiers, for example, or real estate with you have to involve the notary and everything, and this could be addressed with smart contracts applied to sales, to real estate, and finally with crowdfunding as in a similar way. Last slide is just a little bit of literature and references for someone that has that's interested in the topic of programmability, and we have the report from the BIS on Project Meridian FX, and it has quite interesting points on interoperability. There's an article by Lee, Martin, and Muller on the atomic settlement, if someone wants to read a little bit more here. An interesting paper by Doria, and it's an occasional paper from Banca d'Italia on the characteristics of smart contracts. It's written also with Professor Maddalena Rabitti from Roma Tre University, so it's very interesting. Last but not least, so someone wants to do a more complex reading. There's a book by King et al., Disruptive Technology in Finance, and it has a good focus on an aspect that has been mentioned by Xavier in the paper, which is banking as a service. So that was everything from my side. Thank you very much for the attention.
Please.
Thank you. So thank you very much, Emanuele. I really appreciate this comment and these really kind words. Definitely for the first question about client-side programmability, when banks are clients or not, one flaw is that we are slightly trying to be high-level and abstract, and I think that's something you point right. We need to be more in depth of what are the different roles or different participants. For instance, something I've been thinking about and discussing with some countries is how much the programmability needs to be part of the settlement system fully, or can it be an intermediary layer, even a private actor that provides these services that you trust enough, and just as long as they have the good connection with the system. So I think there is interesting things, and the other way around, like what needs exactly these different actors to be able to provide meaningful services. So yeah, definitely a good thing to explore, the ecosystem more precisely, I would say. Regarding the access to target and the legal system, I think that was clearly one thing we wanted to highlight in the paper, is that what limits currently programmability most of the time is not technology capabilities, but the framework around it, and maybe with a stroke of a pen we could change more than changing all the payment infrastructure, so we should consider that at least as an option. Definitely interesting about the definition of interoperability, and I will look into that because I find interesting, especially on money, how much it can have different level of meanings, right? Yes. Money is interoperability in a sense, because anyone can pay anyone in the world almost using money, but so it's a set of systems that are connected together. But when we talk about interoperability, especially as someone a bit more technical, it has a more practical that might not be necessary, because we could, as long as we can pay anyone in the world,
exactly.
We bother about the details of how that works. And finally, on European unified ledger, to me that's definitely the kind of project that are extremely interesting, and as you mentioned, Drex also in looking and exploring that. my main area of question is about the governance of this, because I think it's very clear that as soon as this infrastructure, and you said it even for Europe, is currently target services is just allowing the market to do everything, and then just at one point they use it. So it's the least intervention that's possible. Providing this kind of platform will require to change a little bit the philosophy of saying, okay, the public sector is in the middle of all the other actors and helping them coordinate. It has a more active role. And I think that all of a sudden it changed a lot dynamic and so on. It could be a good way, but definitely we need to rethink how we do this governance, and it will be challenging.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So everything, thank you again for the paper. Very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Xavier. Now I open to the floor. I have a question there.
First of all, it's a pleasure to meet you all. I think it's the first time that I saw a totally technical panel. So congratulations, because I think the DLT is a different matter to discuss. Principle regarding the settlements and the payments. My question is most related because I come from a biggest exchange of the world is Binance. I want to understand better how to also create an environment that should be, we have the parameters and also the tools to have also the private players in these interoperability procedures, because sometimes I know the focus here is the settlements of the banks, but we also have a different world right now. So something that I think it's not a lack, because I understand that the focus here, it is the settlements, is the payment. But for example, in MiCA in Europe, with the regulation of crypto assets in Europe, probably we will have the EMTs and also RRTs with specific types of crypto assets in Europe that could be included in these interoperability procedures, but we do not include other crypto assets with its other category of crypto assets because it's not related totally to payments. So I want to understand how we could create an environment also to include these private players here, and understand better what is the opinion of you all and how we could create this environment for the better and also include the crypto assets in the payments, you know.
If I may start, but I think that really links all three presentations is one of the key challenges of this change of infrastructure is a change in the power play dynamics. So I was already in Daniel's paper and in the presentation of Emmanuel. This is the key question. We are definitely in a system where the central bank main partners are the banks, and it's almost an ecosystem that works this way, and so far it has worked reasonably well. The question is, we have a lot of new players. I think there is an interest from the central banks to open it up and create a more competitive ecosystem, and they are interested in that. The same way, I would say in telecoms, for instance, the new actors were brought in to shake up a little bit the competition. So I think that there is interest in that. Now it's a very difficult power play. I think that's the main question between the different new actors that want to enter. We talked also like the pilot regime that was mentioned by Emmanuel provide the possibility for startups to become financial market infrastructure, so they will be competing with existing financial market infrastructure. Definitely that will shake up, and there will be some blood at some point. So, but the sense of history is already clear. Like there will be more type of infrastructure, more interconnectivity between all these systems. Just we'll see how that happens.
Yes, as it is a general question, would like to add anything?
Well, from my side, let's say that Iago was mentioning MiCA regulations on marketing crypto and crypto asset regulation. Recently in Europe, there's been a little bit of a debate between the ECB and the European Commission, where the ECB deemed the regulation to be a little bit not soft, but it could allow still very important market players to enter in the European market, while the European Commission is claiming that the regulation is quite appropriate already. The point there is that the regulation gives intervention powers to the national competent authorities. So the regulation itself is difficult to be classified as strict or not. I think that the real trigger will be on how and how much the intervention power will be used by the national competent authorities. That's something that we should start seeing in the next period. But ultimately, it depends on how much they will be afraid for financial stability if other big players come along. That's my opinion, my personal opinion on that.
I have a comment. I have a comment on that, if I may. It's important to remember that interoperability is not only a technological concept. It is a technological concept if you take the cross-chain situation, for instance, which it is a puzzle, but it's also a legal situation, an economic topic. So we should not treat interoperability as a technological, but I think there is a solution already. The other dimensions in the legal, political, and economic side, which it seems to me that we're not ready or not clear yet from an international perspective. So just a quick comment on that.
Well, thank you very much. We have reached the end of our session. I would like to thank you all for participating. I will not be keeping you from the lunch. Thank you.
Only to close, once again, thank you to all the speakers, moderators, participants, supporters, and the organizing and support staff. The success of this conference would not have been possible without everyone's contribution. Selecting and inviting keynote speakers and papers, as well as preparing the entire infrastructure, is a challenging task, but it's rewarding when we see the quality of presentations of these 3 days of meaningful conversations and learning. We appreciate everyone's participation and look forward to see you again next week. Please enjoy the lunch that will be served in the hall, and see you next week. Thank you.
Next week? I think next year. Next year or next week? Year, okay, next year. You said next week. Yeah, but that's...
Next week we'll be here.
Yeah, I heard that. Okay, yeah, that would be great. But...
Oh, yes, next week, next year.